I was a sophomore in college when this happened. Back then, I was still living with my parents in a small two-story house in northern Pennsylvania. It wasn't rural, but it wasn't exactly suburban either. The houses weren't close enough where you could lean out your window and talk to your neighbor, but close enough that you could hear a loud argument through the walls if someone was really going at it. We had a backyard, a small patch of woods behind it, and the kind of street where nothing serious ever happened, at least not that people talked about. My parents had planned a weekend trip to visit my older sister. She lived out of state, and they were staying 2 nights. They asked if I wanted to come, but I had exams the following week and figured I'd get more done staying home alone. I'd stayed alone plenty of times, so it didn't feel like anything unusual. They left Friday morning around 9, and I remember standing in the doorway as they drove off, already thinking about how quiet the house was going to be. The house had 3 bedrooms upstairs, my room, my parents' room, and a guest room. The guest room was always kept locked. My parents stored old documents in there, along with some expensive furniture that belonged to my grandmother. I never had a key, and I never needed one. The room wasn't part of my life in any way. It was basically a storage closet with a nice bed in it. The first day alone was normal. I studied, ate whatever leftovers we had, watched some videos, and fell asleep around midnight. Nothing weird. No noises, no strange feelings, no paranoia. The house just felt quiet in the usual way. I actually remember thinking it was nice not having anyone interrupting me. The second day, Saturday, was when things shifted. I woke up around 8 a.m. I wasn't in any rush, so I just lay there scrolling through my phone. The house was cold because my dad usually turned the heat down before leaving for a trip. So I got out of bed, grabbed a hoodie, and stepped into the hallway. And I remember the hallway felt even colder, which didn't strike me as strange right away. Old houses get cold spots. Ours wasn't that old, but still, stuff happens. I went downstairs, made some toast, and started reviewing notes. Around mid-morning, I went back upstairs to grab a textbook. I was halfway up the staircase when I heard something faint on the second floor. Not a loud noise, just a light, short sound, a kind of muffled thump. It stopped before I reached the top step. I didn't tense up or panic or anything. Houses make noises. Pipes, temperature changes, wood expanding or contracting. But I noticed the cold feeling again at the top of the stairs, stronger this time. The air felt like it does when someone leaves a window open in winter, except all the windows were shut. I checked them just in case. Nothing was open. I tried to brush it off and went to my room. As I was grabbing my book, I heard another noise, this time from the hallway. A soft, slow drag against the floor, like something sliding. I stepped out and froze. The noise came from the end of the hallway, the direction of the locked guest room. I didn't move for a good 10 seconds. I waited for another noise, but it didn't come. And again, I explained it away in my head. Maybe something fell over inside the room. Maybe some box slid a bit. Temperature shifts can make things settle. Still, something about it bothered me, and I kept glancing down the hall while I went back to my notes. After a few minutes, I forced myself to stop thinking about it. Around noon, I heated some soup and sat in the living room. Halfway through eating, I heard another noise upstairs. This time it was distinct, like someone shifting their weight on the floor. A single step. I didn't want to go check. I'm not proud of that. I just didn't like the idea of going back up there. But the sound came again about a minute later. A small movement. Not soft enough to be a mouse or something tiny. Not loud enough to be someone walking freely. It sounded like controlled movement, like someone trying to be quiet, but not perfectly succeeding. I set my bowl down and walked to the bottom of the stairs. I stared up at the dark hallway. The air felt still, but not in the peaceful way. More like the air inside a room before someone says something uncomfortable. I took the stairs slowly, pausing every few steps to listen. Nothing. When I got to the top, the hallway felt even colder than before. Not freezing, but cold enough that I could feel it through my hoodie. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Checked my parents' room. Empty. Then I stood in front of the guest room door. The door was locked. It always was. I tried the knob anyway. Still locked. No movement on the other side. No sound. Nothing. I told myself I'd been imagining things. Stress, maybe. Studying. Lack of sleep. Whatever excuse I could think of. That afternoon was quiet again. The house felt normal for a while. I studied downstairs with music on low. I kept checking behind me more than usual, but everything stayed calm. Things didn't pick up again until almost 11 p.m. I was in my room getting ready for bed when I heard a very slow creak in the hallway. Not a thump, not a random settling noise. A creak, like weight pressing down on a floorboard. Then another one. I turned off my lamp and stood still listening. The hallway was dark, except for the faint glow from the bathroom nightlight my mom kept plugged in. For a few seconds, I heard nothing. Then the creaking started again, this time closer. Slow. Heavy. Someone taking careful steps. I stepped back from the door. My heart was pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Then the sound stopped. I don't know how long I waited. Maybe 10 minutes. Eventually, I worked up the courage to open my door a crack. The hallway was empty, but the air was cold again, colder than the last 2 times. I stood there listening. No movement, just stillness. Then, as I moved to close my door, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The guest room door was slightly open. Not wide open, just an inch or two. Enough that I could see a thin line of darkness inside the room. There was no reason for that door to be open. My parents never forgot to lock it, and I definitely didn't open it. I stood there staring at the door for what felt like forever. I kept waiting for it to move again. It didn't. I didn't go near it. I just shut my own door quietly, locked it, and sat on my bed trying to convince myself there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the lock failed. Maybe the door wasn't fully shut earlier. But the noises made that hard to believe. I didn't sleep much. I kept the lamp on all night. Every couple minutes, I'd look at the top of my door, half expecting to see a shadow pass across it. Nothing happened for the rest of the night. The next morning, Sunday, was the worst part of the whole weekend. I went into the hallway around 9. The door to the guest room was wide open now. Not cracked. Fully open. I felt a wave of cold air hit me the moment I stepped toward it. Not just regular cold, unnatural cold, like the kind that comes from airlocked rooms. I should have gone downstairs and called someone right away. But curiosity and fear mixed into something that made me want to know. I needed to see if anything had been moved. I pushed the door open fully. The room looked normal. Everything where it should have been. Boxes stacked, suitcases in the corner, old furniture covered with sheets. No sign of anyone hiding. No sign someone had broken in. But the cold air was still there. Strong enough that I could see my breath faintly. That's when I noticed something else. Something I hadn't seen before. The window in the guest room had a small opening. Not broken, slid open just an inch. Just enough for someone to reach inside, or slide something through. I shut it, locked it, and backed out of the room. The rest of the day I stayed downstairs. I didn't go back up except once to grab clothes. I try to focus on schoolwork, but every sound made me jump. My parents got home around 6 p.m. I didn't say much about the noises. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I just told them the guest room door had come open, and they should check the lock. My dad tested it and said it was loose and probably just swung open. He tightened it and brushed it off. But that night, after they went to bed, I heard something moving upstairs again. Not walking, just a single, slow drag along the floor, right in front of the guest room. I never stayed alone in that house again after that weekend. And a year later, when we moved, my dad found something wedged behind the dresser in the guest room. A small handheld flashlight. Not ours. Someone had brought it in. Someone had been in that room, long before I heard the first noise. I used to live in a pretty quiet neighborhood in western Ohio. Not a rich area, not a bad one either. Just the type of street where people cut their grass on weekends, kids ride bikes in circles, and everyone knows at least two of their neighbors by name. I rented a small single-story house at the edge of the neighborhood. It was nothing fancy, but it was affordable, and I liked having space to myself. This happened 2 years ago, when I was home alone for the night. It was late fall, one of those weeks where the sun goes down earlier than your brain expects, and the evenings feel longer than they should. I had the night off and wasn't doing anything special. Just cleaning, doing laundry, watching videos, the usual boring stuff. Everything started around 9:30 p.m. I was in the kitchen putting dishes away when I heard the doorbell. Not a knock, a doorbell. A single press. Calm, not hurried. At first I didn't think anything of it. Delivery drivers sometimes bring things late in my area. The bigger companies run until 10 or 11 during the holidays. But I hadn't ordered anything. When I went to the front window, I saw a white delivery van parked in front of my house. Not one of the big company trucks. Just a plain cargo van with no branding. The kind that could belong to anyone, contract drivers, movers, electricians, or someone who bought a van cheap. A man stood on my porch, tall, slim, wearing a beanie, gray jacket, and black gloves. He held a medium-sized package against his hip like it actually belonged there. He rang the doorbell again. I hesitated. I've had packages delivered to the wrong address plenty of times, so I figured he might just be lost. I opened the door, but only about 6 inches, with the chain lock still on. "Can I help you?" I asked. He didn't smile. His expression didn't shift at all. He just held out the package and said, "Delivery for you. Need a signature." His voice was completely flat. No tired delivery driver tone, no friendly tone, nothing. Just flat and dull, like he was reading a line he'd been practicing. "I didn't order anything," I said. He shifted the package slightly. "It's for this address." "What's the name on it?" He didn't look down at the label. He didn't even move his eyes. He just said, "I need your signature." It wasn't the way he said it that bothered me. It was the fact that he didn't even try to show me the label. Delivery drivers always offer it when someone hesitates. He didn't. I said, "I'm not signing for something unless I know what it is. Who's it from?" He stared straight at the gap in the door, like he was waiting for me to unlock it. Then he said, "Just open the door. I'll hand it to you." That was the moment my body tightened. Something was wrong. His tone changed just slightly, just enough to sound like a command instead of a request. "No thanks," I said. "Just tell me where it's from." He paused for a few seconds, too long for a normal interaction. Then he raised the package a little, like he was offering it again. "Your signature," he said. "Not, I need your signature. Just your signature." Like that was the only phrase he was planning to use. I shut the door completely and locked it. The man didn't ring the bell again. He didn't knock. He just stood there. I peeked through the small window next to the door and saw him looking at the door, holding perfectly still. He stayed there for around 20 seconds before turning slowly and walking back toward the van. I watched him. He moved with the same weird stiffness his voice had. No hurry, no irritation, No confusion. Just slow, steady steps. He got into the van, turned the headlights on, but didn't drive away. He sat there for at least a minute. The headlights lit up the front of my house like he wanted to make sure I knew he was still there. Finally, he pulled away and drove down the street. I tried to relax. I really did. I kept telling myself it was probably just some independent contractor who was burned out or awkward. Maybe he had the wrong address. Maybe he was frustrated. I came up with a whole list of excuses to make myself calm down. But the whole interaction was off. The lack of branding, the wrong tone, the refusal to show the label, the refusal to answer a normal question. The way he said, "Just open the door." Something about it didn't sit right. Around 11:15 p.m., 2 hours after the visit, I heard tapping at one of my windows. Not loud tapping. Soft, deliberate, a finger tapping glass. It came from the back of the house. I froze. My house wasn't big, and the back windows were only a few steps from the hallway. I stood in the kitchen listening. The tapping happened again. 5 slow taps. I walked to the hallway corner and peeked toward the back door window. The curtains were closed, but I could see a shadow through them. Not a clear shape, just the outline of someone standing near the glass. Then the tapping stopped. I backed into the living room and grabbed my phone. I didn't make a sound. I didn't call anyone yet. My brain was trying to catch up with the situation. I heard something outside. Not tapping this time. Footsteps on the deck. Slow, careful steps. Someone trying not to make noise, but still doing it. The steps paused near the back door, then started moving toward the side of the house. A few seconds later, I heard another noise, something brushing lightly against the siding, traveling along the side wall, like a hand, or clothing brushing against it. The footsteps moved toward the front of the house. When they reached the corner near the front window, everything went quiet. I held my breath. Then the doorbell rang again. One single, calm press. I crept toward the front window. My hands were sweating, and I felt every heartbeat in my throat and ears. When I lifted the corner of the curtain and looked outside, I felt my stomach drop. It was the same man. He wasn't holding the package anymore. His hands were empty, and he wasn't standing on the porch like before. He was standing closer to the window, closer to the wall, like he wanted to see if I was watching him. He looked directly at the curtain, not at the door, at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't lift his hand. He didn't move. He just stared. I backed away from the window quietly and finally called 911. I whispered to the dispatcher that someone was outside my house, that he had already come earlier pretending to deliver something, and that he was trying to get me to open the door. The dispatcher stayed on the line and told me to stay away from the windows. She said an officer was already on the way. While I waited, there were no more footsteps, no tapping, no doorbell, nothing. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. That was the fastest I'd ever seen them respond. I heard the cruiser pull up, lights but no siren. The dispatcher told me not to open the door until the officer identified himself. When I finally cracked the door open, the officer asked me to stay inside while he searched around the property. He was gone for maybe 5 minutes before coming back. "No one's out there," he said, "but your side gate is open." My gate was always closed and latched. It didn't swing open on its own. He took note of the footprints around the house, muddy ones, leading around the back, the side, and the front window. They matched one person, one set of steps. The officer asked for a description. I told him everything I could. Here's where things got even stranger. When I tried to explain the delivery van he'd driven earlier, the officer immediately asked, "Did the van have any kind of temporary paper plate?" It did. I remembered that part crystal clear. The temporary tag taped where the license plate should have been. The officer exhaled slowly and said they had reports over the past few weeks of someone driving around in an unmarked delivery van, stopping at random homes at night, usually when people were alone. The stories weren't identical, but the behavior was similar, asking people to open the door for a package they didn't order, pressuring them to sign, refusing to give sender information. They hadn't identified the man yet, and no one had been hurt, but a few people had reported someone trying their windows after they refused a fake delivery. The officer stayed parked outside my house for about 15 minutes before doing one more slow drive around the block. I didn't see the van again that night. For the next week, I didn't stay home alone after dark. I kept the curtains shut and double-checked every lock. I even installed a camera on the porch. The man never came back, but every now and then, someone online posts about a fake delivery driver with no branding, using a plain white van, working late at night, insisting on signatures for packages no one ordered. The description is always close enough to match him. I still don't know what he wanted from me, but I'm convinced he wasn't delivering anything. I bought my first house in 2019. It wasn't anything impressive, just a modest two-story place in upstate New York. I wanted something quiet, something I could fix up over time, and something far enough from the main road that I wouldn't hear traffic all day. The house had been sitting empty for a while before I moved in, but it wasn't abandoned or anything like that. The previous owner had passed away, and the family didn't want to deal with repairs, so they sold it cheap. I moved in during early spring. The first couple of months were normal. The house creaked at night, but old houses do that. The kind of noises you tell yourself not to pay attention to. I worked during the day and spent evenings doing basic repairs, painting, replacing outlets, fixing loose cabinet doors, stuff like that. I enjoyed it. The house gave me space and quiet, and I needed both. The first odd thing happened about 3 months after I moved in. I had just gone to bed around 1 a.m. I'm a night person, so that wasn't unusual. My bedroom was upstairs, at the end of a hallway. The staircase came up from the living room, turned right at the landing, and led straight to the hallway, where all 3 bedrooms were. I remember lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I heard a sound on the staircase. It sounded like someone exhaling heavily, not a sigh, a breath, a slow, steady exhale coming from halfway up the stairs. I froze. My house wasn't one of those places where drafts sneak in through 100 different cracks. The windows were fairly new. The insulation was updated. Nothing about that house produced human-sounding breaths. I got up and walked to my doorway. The hallway was dark except for a faint night light I kept in the bathroom. The staircase was quiet. No movement. No more breathing. I stood there for a full minute, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Eventually, I went back to bed and forced myself to forget it. The next few nights, nothing happened. Then one night, around the same time, maybe 12:50 or so, I heard it again. A breath on the staircase. This time it came from a different step. Lower, closer to the bottom. It sounded like someone paused mid-step, leaned forward, and exhaled. I went to the doorway again. The breathing stopped instantly. The house went quiet. I told myself I was probably hearing the heating system kicking in, even though the sound wasn't anything like that. I needed a normal explanation, and that was the closest one I could come up with. But over the next weeks, it kept happening. Always late at night. Always on the staircase. Never the same step twice. Sometimes I'd hear one breath. Sometimes 2. Sometimes a drawn-out exhale that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. After about a month of this, I started keeping the bedroom door closed at night, which made me feel a little safer for some reason. But the sound happened whether the door was open or closed. I'd be drifting off and suddenly snap awake, because I heard that same slow breath, always at a different distance and tone, like someone was testing each step one at a time. I still didn't panic. It bothered me, but not enough to think something was seriously wrong. I blamed stress, my sleep schedule, the house settling, anything that made the situation less strange. But things changed one night in mid-July. I was in the front yard around 10:30 p.m., watering some shrubs, when I noticed the basement window on the side of the house was open. Not broken, just slid open a few inches. I never opened that window. It was the only basement window in the house, and I kept it locked because I didn't want rain getting in. I figured maybe I forgot to latch it after checking something downstairs, but I honestly couldn't remember the last time I had even touched it. I closed it and latched it. Then I checked the rest of the windows. All locked. That night I stayed downstairs later than usual. I didn't want to go up yet. I don't know why, but something about that open basement window stuck in my mind like a warning. The basement wasn't creepy. It was a regular, unfinished basement with a washer, dryer, and a bunch of stored stuff. It didn't spook me normally. Around 1 a.m., I finally turned off the TV and started heading upstairs. Halfway up, I stopped. There was a sound above me. A breath. A long, slow breath coming from the landing. This time it wasn't faint. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't something I could pretend I imagined. It sounded like someone was standing at the top of the staircase waiting for me. I didn't move. I just stayed frozen on the step. I remember holding the railing, so tight my hand was shaking. The breathing stopped. Then I heard the next sound, one I had never heard before. A quiet shuffle of a foot moving on the carpet at the top of the stairs. Just one. I backed down the stairs slowly, step by step, never looking away from the landing. When I reached the bottom, I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, some cheap metal flashlight, and stood in the living room staring up the staircase. No movement, no breathing, nothing. I didn't sleep upstairs that night. I lay on the couch with a lamp on and tried to make sense of everything. The breathing, the open basement window, the random footsteps. At some point around 5 in the morning, I drifted off. The next day, I did something I probably should have done earlier. I inspected the basement more carefully. I looked at the window from the inside. The latch was old and loose. Not broken, but weak enough that someone could pull it upward if they really tried. I pushed on it with one hand, and it gave way easier than I expected. That alone put a knot in my stomach. I checked the rest of the basement. Nothing looked disturbed. No footprints in the dust. No moved boxes. No signs someone had been living down there. But the basement had a dark corner behind a furnace I rarely looked at. When I checked it, I found something strange. A trail of scuff marks on the concrete floor. Small ones. Faint, but definitely from shoes. They led toward the wall, stopped near the window, then disappeared. I tried to think of a logical explanation. Maybe I'd made the marks myself somehow. Maybe I had dragged something over there without remembering. I came up with a dozen guesses, but none of them made sense. I sealed the window with a piece of wood and a screw, just to be safe. That night, I went to bed early. I was tired and stressed and wanted to get a normal night of sleep for once. Around 1:10 a.m., I woke up. I didn't hear a noise. I didn't see anything. I just woke up suddenly, the way you do when something feels off. Then I heard it. A breath. This time it didn't come from the staircase. It came from the hallway directly outside my bedroom door. A slow exhale, like someone standing inches from the other side of the door. My throat tightened instantly. I didn't move or sit up. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the doorknob, waiting for it to turn. The breathing continued. Faint but close. The kind of sound you hear when someone tries not to breathe too loudly. After maybe 10 seconds, it stopped. 2 seconds later, a soft footstep moved away from my door and down the hallway. Then another. Then silence. I stayed awake until sunrise, gripping the phone in my hand, listening for the slightest sound. The next morning, I walked the entire house from top to bottom. Everything looked normal. All windows were locked. The basement window was sealed shut. Nothing moved. Nothing missing. I didn't know what else to do, so I started keeping lights on at night. I set up a cheap camera at the top of the staircase and another in the hallway. Not for security, just so I'd have proof I wasn't losing it. For the next 2 nights, nothing happened. No breathing, no footsteps, no noises at all. I actually started thinking maybe sealing the basement window solved the problem. On the 3rd night, I checked the hallway camera footage the next morning. At 1:03 a.m., the camera recorded something. The audio picked up a slow, deep exhale. Soft footsteps approached the bedroom door. The breathing continued for several seconds. Then the footsteps retreated down the hallway. The video didn't show a person. The resolution wasn't great, and the hallway was dark, but I could see something move at the edge of the frame, a shadow passing across the wall. I watched that footage 30 times. It didn't make sense. The breathing was the same sound I'd been hearing. The footsteps were real. The shadow was real. But nothing triggered the motion sensor enough to illuminate the hall. That day, I called a friend and asked if I could stay at his place for a few nights. I didn't explain everything, but I told him enough that he said yes without hesitation. When I went back to the house 4 days later, I brought someone with me. We checked the entire place. Every room, every closet, every inch of the basement, the attic, the crawl space under the stairs. We didn't find anything unusual. No signs someone was living there. No signs of forced entry. No new marks. I moved out 2 months later mainly because I couldn't sleep there anymore. Not without imagining someone standing on the staircase every night, pausing on a different step, waiting for me to move. The only explanation I ever found came from a neighbor who lived 2 houses down. An older man, retired, who'd been there long before me. He told me the previous owner had become paranoid in his final years and installed extra locks on the basement door because he swore someone kept coming in at night through the basement window. No one believed him. They thought he was confused or slipping mentally. But the neighbor told me something else, too. He said, "I used to hear things coming from your place at night when it was empty. I thought it was animals. But hearing what you just told me, maybe it wasn't." I didn't ask him to clarify. I didn't want more details. I just wanted to leave that house behind.